For decades, Keanu Reeves has guarded a secret no one dared to ask about: his father. But when Jimmy Kimmel finally did, something inside Keanu shattered. What happened next stunned the world and left the studio in silence. Why did Keanu walk off the show in tears? The answer will change everything you thought you knew. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The iconic Hollywood Boulevard glimmered under the fading evening sun. Tourists and locals meandered along the bustling sidewalks, their eyes drawn to the star-studded names embedded in the pavement. The El Capitan Entertainment Center stood proudly amid the sea of lights, its marquee glowing warmly, inviting fans and passers-by alike to witness another night of live television magic. The familiar hum of excitement and chatter filled the air, the kind of anticipation that only a big-name talk show could inspire. Crowds clustered outside the entrance, some clutching tickets, others hoping for a glimpse of a celebrity as they arrived or departed. Cameras flashed sporadically as photographers captured the last bits of golden hour. The evening held a promise of laughter, candid stories, and a touch of Hollywood charm. Yet beneath the surface of the glitz, there was a quiet intensity building, unnoticed by most, but palpable to those who paid attention. Inside the Jimmy Kimmel Live studio, the atmosphere buzzed with controlled energy. The audience filed in quickly, filling every seat with eager anticipation. Their conversations bubbled with excitement about the evening's guest, a man beloved for his humility, kindness, and iconic roles that had etched him into Hollywood history. They whispered about Keanu Reeves, whose name alone brought a wave of enthusiasm and respect. For many, this was more than just another celebrity appearance. It was a chance to connect with a figure who had quietly captured hearts worldwide. The studio itself gleamed under the glow of perfectly positioned lights, every detail meticulously arranged to create the ideal environment for live television. The set was polished, warm, and inviting, designed to make guests feel comfortable and the audience feel at home. Stagehands moved with precision, adjusting equipment and preparing for the moments to come. The familiar rhythms of a late-night talk show were about to unfold, with laughter, stories, and that unique blend of candidness and scripted charm that had made Jimmy Kimmel a household name. Backstage, the mood was calm but focused. Makeup artists applied their craft with practiced hands, smoothing out skin and softening shadows, ensuring the cameras would capture the guests' best angles. Keanu Reeves sat quietly in his makeup chair, dressed simply in his signature black t-shirt and jeans, his demeanor reflective yet guarded. His dark eyes, often described as deep pools of calm, held a subtle tension tonight, a quiet alertness, as if he was carrying something beneath his composed exterior. He adjusted slightly as the makeup artist touched up the last details, his movements measured but unhurried. It was a stark contrast to the lively chatter and bustling activity around him. To the casual observer, Keanu appeared the picture of serene confidence, but those who knew him well could sense an undercurrent of unease, a guardedness that suggested this was not just another promotional appearance. Jimmy Kimmel sat a short distance away, quietly reviewing his note cards for the final time. His fingers shuffled through the carefully prepared questions and jokes, each one designed to elicit charm, warmth, and occasional surprise. Years of experience had honed his instincts, allowing him to read guests with remarkable accuracy and guide conversations that captivated millions. Tonight, he expected a smooth, engaging interview, the kind that would promote Keanu's latest film while offering glimpses into the actor's thoughtful perspective. The audience warmed up, laughter spilling naturally from the front rows as Jimmy made his opening monologue. The musical guest had just finished, leaving the crowd energized and ready for the main event. The air was thick with expectation, the shared understanding that the next 30 minutes would be a mix of entertainment and insight. Everyone was eager to see Keanu in his element, to hear stories from the set, and perhaps enjoy some lighthearted banter. Keanu took a deep breath as he prepared to walk onto the stage. His calm was deliberate, a practiced stillness born from years in the spotlight. He moved with a quiet grace, his footsteps steady and sure, despite the weight of public scrutiny that accompanied his every appearance. His choice of attire, unassuming black t-shirt and jeans, reinforced the image of a man who valued simplicity and authenticity over flash and spectacle. As he stepped into the bright stage lights, the audience erupted into applause. Cheers filled the room, genuine and sustained. Keanu's modest wave and soft smile acknowledged their warmth, a brief but meaningful connection between star and fans. The contrast between the flashing cameras and his humble demeanor was striking, a reminder of why he had become one of Hollywood's most respected and beloved figures. The opening exchange between Jimmy and Keanu was effortless. Jimmy's quick wit paired with Keanu's thoughtful replies created an easy rapport that put the audience at ease. They began with the familiar terrain of the new film, its themes, challenges on set, and moments that had left a lasting impression on Keanu. The stories were engaging but light, peppered with humor and mutual respect. The chemistry between host and guest was clear, a dance perfected through years of similar interviews. Yet, as the conversation flowed, a subtle shift began. Keanu's eyes, usually steady and warm, flickered briefly with something less comfortable. His hands, resting lightly on his lap, tightened momentarily, an unconscious gesture that hinted at the emotional undercurrents beneath the surface. For those paying close attention, it was a sign that tonight's interview might be more than just routine promotion. Jimmy, sensing the natural rhythm, began steering the discussion toward more personal topics. His reputation was built on finding the human moments that elevated interviews beyond mere publicity. He spoke of Keanu's approach to selecting roles, his views on the nature of fame, and the inevitable passage of time in Hollywood. Keanu responded with grace, offering insights that were both thoughtful and guarded. His answers balanced openness with discretion, revealing enough to engage viewers while protecting the parts of his life he kept private. The audience remained captivated, drawn into the unfolding narrative. Laughter and applause punctuated the conversation, the warmth of the room a testament to the genuine affection felt for Keanu. Yet beneath the surface, tension simmered quietly. The stakes of the interview were subtly rising, though no one yet realized just how deeply the evening would reach into Keanu's guarded past. Jimmy's eyes flicked to his notes, preparing for the next question. It was a moment charged with anticipation, though no one outside the studio could predict what was coming next. The question would crack the carefully maintained facade, forcing Keanu to confront a part of his history he had long avoided. What followed would not be lighthearted or easy. It would be raw, emotional, and unprecedented. Backstage, the crew prepared for the transition, unaware that the planned flow of the show was about to change irrevocably. The cameras rolled steadily, capturing every moment with professional precision. Millions of viewers tuned in, expecting another evening of entertainment. But they were about to witness something far more profound. As Jimmy prepared to ask about Keanu's childhood, the studio seemed to grow quieter. The audience, unaware of the tension, leaned forward eagerly. Keanu's gaze shifted, a shadow passing across his face. For the first time in decades, he was about to speak his father's name on national television. The moment hung heavy in the air, filled with unspoken memories and years of silence. The stage was set for a revelation that would shatter expectations and touch a nerve far deeper than any previous interview. The easy rhythm of the show was about to be broken, replaced by something raw and real, a glimpse into the private pain that had shaped one of Hollywood's most enigmatic figures. The applause softened, replaced by a silence filled with anticipation. Keanu adjusted his posture, hands resting still on his knees. His breathing was controlled but steady. The audience waited, unaware that what they were about to hear would leave a lasting mark on everyone present. In that quiet moment, the familiar world of late-night television faded away. The lights, the cameras, and the scripted charm gave way to something far more human and vulnerable. Keanu Reeves, the man behind the roles, was about to share a truth he had held tightly for nearly 60 years. It was a story of absence, longing, and the scars left behind by a father who had vanished from his life when he was just a child. The anticipation hung thick as the first words escaped Keanu's lips. The silence that followed was not just the quiet of a studio waiting for the next line. It was the stillness of an audience witnessing a moment of profound revelation, the beginning of a journey into a deeply personal past that would change the tone of the evening forever. The moment Keanu Reeves settled into his guest chair across from Jimmy Kimmel, the studio lights seemed to shine a little softer on him. The applause that had greeted him moments before gently faded into the background as the familiar rhythm of a late-night talk show took over. Jimmy flashed his signature grin and launched into the first question, keeping the tone light and welcoming. "So, Keanu, tell us about the new film. What drew you to this project?" Jimmy asked with genuine interest, his voice warm and easy. Keanu smiled, the kind of humble smile that had become his trademark. "It's a story about resilience and hope. Something that felt really important, especially these days," he replied thoughtfully. "The characters are complex, and the story doesn't shy away from the difficult parts, but there's this thread of optimism running through it." Jimmy nodded, clearly engaged. "Sounds like classic you, mixing depth with that unmistakable charm. What was it like working on set? Any behind-the-scenes moments you can share?" Keanu's eyes twinkled with a touch of mischief as he leaned in slightly. "Well, there was this one scene where I was supposed to look really tough, John Wick style, but I kept tripping over the prop gun. The whole crew had to stifle their laughter while I tried to play it cool." The audience laughed warmly, the lighthearted moment diffusing any tension in the room. Jimmy chuckled, shaking his head. "I can't picture John Wick tripping over anything." "Are you sure it was you and not a stunt double?" Keanu gave a mock serious look. "That was definitely me. No stunt double for that one," he said with a wink. The banter continued effortlessly, Jimmy asking about the challenges Keanu faced juggling intense action scenes with emotional depth. Keanu responded with a calm, measured tone, sharing how he prepared mentally and physically, always aiming to bring authenticity to his roles. His answers revealed a thoughtful actor, deeply invested in his craft, yet never seeking to overshadow the stories he helped tell. Throughout the conversation, Keanu exhibited a remarkable balance of humility and insight. When questions veered toward his personal life or career milestones, he offered brief, careful responses, gently deflecting when topics felt too intrusive. His ability to navigate these moments with grace was evident, a subtle signal that while open, there were boundaries he maintained firmly. The audience responded warmly to this mix of openness and discretion. Their applause and laughter echoed at just the right moments, creating a comfortable atmosphere that felt genuine and inviting. There was a shared sense of admiration, a collective appreciation for a star who seemed as grounded off-screen as he was compelling on it. Jimmy, recognizing the rapport he had built, smoothly transitioned the conversation toward a slightly more personal direction. "You've had quite the journey, Keanu. From your early days navigating the industry to becoming one of the most beloved actors worldwide. What's your approach to choosing roles now?" Keanu considered the question, his voice steady and thoughtful. "I look for stories that resonate with me on a deeper level, stories that challenge me and offer something meaningful to the audience. It's not just about the action or the fame anymore, it's about connection, authenticity." Jimmy smiled, sensing the shift to something more intimate yet still respectful. "That authenticity is what people love about you. Even with all the success, you've remained so genuine. How do you keep that balance in such a demanding industry?" Keanu's gaze softened. "I remind myself of what matters outside the spotlight. Family, friendships, moments of quiet. And I try to stay true to who I am, no matter what." The audience responded with heartfelt applause, the sincerity in Keanu's words striking a chord. There was a tenderness in the room now, a shared acknowledgement of the challenges behind the glamour. Jimmy, sensing the moment, pressed gently but carefully. You've also been incredibly private about your personal life over the years, which only adds to the respect people have for you. But I wonder, how has that shaped your journey? Keanu paused briefly, his eyes reflecting a guarded vulnerability. Privacy is important. It's where I find peace and strength. It allows me to process the world on my terms. The subtle shift in tone didn't go unnoticed by the audience. A hush settled briefly, the collective focus tightening. It was clear that beneath the calm exterior, there was more beneath the surface. Layers of experience and emotion that had been carefully protected. Jimmy's next question was delivered with practiced empathy. Keanu, you've touched so many lives through your work and your kindness. What do you think keeps you grounded amid all of this? Keanu's reply was steady, infused with quiet conviction. Gratitude. For the people around me, for the opportunities, for the chance to tell stories that matter. And the understanding that, no matter the success, we all have our struggles. The audience seemed to lean in, moved by the humility and depth of his response. The applause that followed was genuine and sustained, a testament to the connection Keanu had fostered through years of authenticity. Jimmy nodded, ready to continue, but also aware of the delicate balance he had to maintain. The interview had begun with lighthearted banter and was gradually moving toward more personal territory. The kind of space Jimmy excelled in, but one that demanded sensitivity. Keanu, you've always been thoughtful about how you handle fame and aging in Hollywood, Jimmy said, shifting the conversation gently. How do you view the changes that come with time in this industry? Keanu smiled softly. It's inevitable, of course, but I try to embrace it, focus on the growth and the stories I want to tell. Age brings perspective, and that's invaluable. The audience applauded again, the mood still warm but increasingly reflective. Keanu's words carried the weight of someone who had seen both the highs and lows of a long career, choosing to focus on the meaningful moments rather than the fleeting. Jimmy's next move was subtle but deliberate. You've been through a lot, both publicly and privately, and yet you maintain such resilience. What's your secret? Keanu's response was measured, almost philosophical. Resilience comes from accepting life's complexities, the joys and the pain, and finding strength in vulnerability. It's not always easy, but it's necessary. The room seemed to hold its breath, the usual pace of a talk show slowing as the conversation deepened. The audience's applause was quieter this time, filled with respect and empathy. Jimmy nodded thoughtfully, sensing the moment but still unaware of the deeper emotional currents below. That's profound, Keanu. It's why so many people look up to you. But tell me, what do you hope your legacy will be? Keanu looked out toward the audience, his expression contemplative. I hope to be remembered as someone who stayed true, who cared deeply about the people around me, and who told stories that inspired. The applause returned, fuller this time, wrapping the room in a warm embrace. For a few moments, everything felt right. The perfect blend of celebrity and sincerity, entertainment and honesty. Yet beneath it all, the undercurrent of tension remained, barely perceptible but growing. Keanu's calm demeanor was a mask for something heavier, something Jimmy was about to unearth. The question that would follow was poised to break through years of silence, to touch a wound Keanu had long kept hidden. The cameras rolled steadily, capturing every smile, every thoughtful pause, every flicker of emotion. The audience sat on the edge of their seats, unaware that they were about to witness a transformation, a shift from lighthearted interview to a profound exploration of pain and resilience. The gentle banter, the laughter, the applause, all were the prelude to a moment that would forever change the course of the evening. For Keanu Reeves, the night was no longer just about promoting a film. It was about confronting a lifetime of silence, about speaking truths that had been buried deep for decades. And for millions watching at home, it would become a powerful testament to the strength it takes to face one's past and the courage to let the world see vulnerability behind the fame. As the interview progressed, Jimmy Kimmel's tone shifted subtly, moving from light-hearted banter to a more thoughtful, reflective pace. He leaned in slightly, his voice softening, inviting Keanu to share more than just the surface stories. "Keanu, you've been in this industry for decades now," Jimmy began. "With all the ups and downs, what's your personal philosophy on fame and how it shapes a person?" Keanu considered the question carefully, his eyes steady and calm as he replied, "Fame can be both a blessing and a burden. It gives you a platform, a chance to influence, but it also comes with scrutiny and expectations. I try not to let it define me. At the end of the day, I'm just a person, with flaws, hopes, and fears like anyone else." There was a quiet sincerity in his voice that resonated with the audience. The warmth of his words, coupled with a humility rarely seen in Hollywood, drew a thoughtful silence from the room. Jimmy nodded, acknowledging the depth beneath Keanu's measured reply. "Do you think fame has changed you?" Jimmy asked, voice gentle. "Or have you managed to hold on to who you were before the spotlight?" Keanu's response was measured but honest. "I hope I've stayed true to myself. That's the challenge, isn't it? To navigate the pressures without losing your core. It's not always easy, but it's necessary." The audience responded with soft applause, sensing that Keanu was opening a window into the man behind the movies, revealing layers of vulnerability beneath the calm exterior. Jimmy pressed on, carefully balancing curiosity with respect. "And what about aging in Hollywood? It's an industry that often feels obsessed with youth. How do you approach that reality?" Keanu's gaze grew reflective. "Aging is natural, and I've come to see it as a privilege. It brings perspective, wisdom. I focus on the stories I want to tell and the people I want to work with, rather than the ticking clock. There's freedom in embracing who you are at every stage." His words carried the weight of experience, a quiet confidence that spoke to resilience and acceptance. The audience seemed to lean in, drawn by this rare glimpse of authenticity. Jimmy smiled, sensing the emotional current in the conversation, but unaware of the depths yet to be revealed. "You're known for your kindness and generosity off-screen. How do you keep grounded amid all the attention?" Keanu's reply was gentle but firm. "I surround myself with people who keep me honest. Family, close friends, and I make time for the things that nourish the soul. Quiet moments, nature, creativity. It's about balance." The audience applauded, touched by the honesty and grace in his voice. For a moment, the world of glitz and glamour felt distant, replaced by something more real and human. Jimmy, now fully engaged, steered the conversation toward the delicate terrain he had long mastered, the personal stories that reveal the heart behind the celebrity. "You've had your share of personal challenges over the years," he said carefully. "How have those experiences shaped you?" Keanu's face grew contemplative. "Life's difficulties teach you about strength, compassion, and humility. They remind you that success is fragile and that every day is an opportunity to be better, kinder." His answer was sincere, touching on universal truths that resonated deeply. The audience remained captivated, sensing the intimacy of the moment, but not yet aware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. Jimmy nodded, reading the subtle signals, but not yet fully prepared for what was coming. "And your approach to fame, it's clear you don't take it lightly. Do you ever find it overwhelming?" Keanu paused, then spoke with a quiet honesty that held the room captive. "Sometimes, yes, but I try to focus on what's real. Fame can isolate you, make you feel like you're living behind a glass wall. That's why privacy is so important to me." The subtle shift in tone deepened the emotional texture of the interview. The audience responded with an attentive silence. the kind that comes when someone reveals a guarded truth. Jimmy leaned forward slightly, his voice softening even more. You've mentioned privacy a few times. How do you protect that part of your life, especially in an age where everything is public? Keanu's answer was deliberate. It's a constant effort, setting boundaries, choosing what to share and what to keep sacred. Privacy isn't about secrecy, it's about respect for yourself and your loved ones. The audience's response was a gentle, understanding applause. It was clear that this conversation was transcending typical celebrity interviews. It was touching something real, something deeply human. Jimmy's next question was posed with practiced sensitivity. You've been through loss and hardship. How do you find the strength to keep moving forward? Keanu's gaze dropped briefly, then met Jimmy's with quiet resolve. Grief is a part of life. It changes you, but it doesn't have to define you. I find strength in connection, with family, with friends, and with the work I do. Every day is a new chance. The room was silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. The audience sensed the emotional gravity, even if they did not yet understand the full depth of what lay beneath. Jimmy nodded slowly, sensing he was close to uncovering something profound, but still unsure of the impact. It's inspiring to hear you speak so openly. Your story resonates with so many. Is there a message you hope people take away from your journey? Keanu's response was quiet but powerful. That vulnerability is strength. That it's okay to be human, to have scars, to struggle, and still find joy. Life is complicated, but honesty and kindness can guide us through. The applause that followed was heartfelt and sustained, filling the studio with warmth and respect. For a brief moment, the interview felt like a shared human experience rather than a scripted performance. Jimmy's voice softened further. Keanu, you've maintained such dignity through everything. How do you stay centered amid the noise? Keanu's reply was steady, calm. Meditation, mindfulness, and the love of those around me, and remembering what truly matters. Not fame, not success, but connection and authenticity. The audience was fully engaged now, the mood shifting from lighthearted promotion to a space of genuine reflection. Jimmy glanced down at his notes, a flicker of anticipation crossing his face, as he prepared to ask the next question, the one he hoped would reveal a deeper truth. Yet even as he reached for the card, neither Jimmy nor anyone in the studio fully grasped the significance of what was about to unfold. The cameras continued to roll, capturing every subtle change in Keanu's expression, every measured breath. The air felt charged with expectancy, the kind that precedes a turning point. The audience sat still, waiting, unaware that the conversation was about to cross a threshold from thoughtful conversation into something raw and deeply personal. Jimmy's next words, gentle and calculated, were poised to unlock a chapter of Keanu's lifelong kept hidden, a chapter that would reveal wounds never before spoken of in public. The room held its collective breath, the glow of the studio lights illuminating a moment suspended in time. For Keanu Reeves, this was no longer just a talk show interview. It was a confrontation with decades of silence and unspoken pain. And for those watching, it would become an unforgettable lesson in courage and vulnerability. Jimmy shifted in his chair, lowering his voice almost to a whisper as he carefully tread into more personal territory. Keanu, he began softly, if you don't mind me asking, can you tell us a little about your childhood? I know you've been very private about your upbringing, and I want to respect that, but sometimes understanding where someone comes from helps us appreciate the journey even more. At that moment, the subtle tension that had been simmering just beneath the surface in Keanu's eyes deepened. His posture stiffened ever so slightly, a quiet signal to those watching that this was no ordinary question. His hands, which had been resting casually on his knees moments before, now became perfectly still. It was a small but unmistakable sign, one that told the audience there was a struggle unfolding inside, even if Keanu's voice remained calm. Taking a slow, measured breath, Keanu began to speak, his voice calm yet carrying an undertone of cautious precision. "My childhood was unique," he said carefully. "My mother, Patricia, was incredible. She raised my sister Kim and me almost entirely on her own. She was strong, resilient, and determined to give us a life better than what she had." His words painted a picture of a woman who carried great weight on her shoulders, a single mother doing everything she could for her children. The room seemed to lean in, absorbing the genuine respect and affection woven into his tone. Jimmy nodded encouragingly, sensing he was approaching the delicate heart of Keanu's story. "That must have been challenging," he replied gently. "All that moving around. Where did you live during those years?" Keanu's answers became more succinct, his tone shifting subtly toward guarded. "We lived in Toronto for a while, then New York, then back to Toronto. My mother worked in the entertainment industry, so we moved where her work took us. It wasn't always easy, but she made sure we were taken care of." He avoided dwelling on the reasons for the moves or the impact they might have had, skimming over the surface of what must have been a complex and sometimes turbulent childhood. The careful phrasing, focusing on his mother's work rather than deeper family dynamics, was not lost on Jimmy, who had long since learned to read between the lines. The audience sat quietly, sensing the undercurrent of withheld stories, but respecting the boundaries Keanu was setting. There was a collective pause, a breath held in anticipation but also in empathy. Jimmy, ever the skilled interviewer, chose to respect that space, though his curiosity was apparent. "It sounds like your mother was a remarkable woman," he said softly, "raising 2 kids on her own, navigating the ups and downs of life and the public eye. How did she influence the person you are today?" Keanu's gaze softened as he considered the question. "She taught me resilience," he answered slowly. "To keep going, no matter what. To be kind, even when things are hard. She never complained, never let us see her struggles. That strength shaped me." The room seemed to breathe with him, the warmth of his words drawing a gentle applause from the audience. It was a tender moment, a glimpse into the foundation of Keanu's character. Jimmy nodded again, sensing the perfect balance between openness and discretion. "And your sister Kim, how has your relationship with her evolved over the years?" Keanu smiled faintly, a spark of affection lighting his eyes. "Kim has always been my anchor. We've been through a lot together, but we've always had each other's backs. Family is everything." The audience responded with a soft murmur of approval, touched by the genuine connection between siblings so often shielded from public view. Jimmy leaned forward slightly, his voice lowering once more. "Keanu, I know this is personal, and I want you to share only what you're comfortable with. But if you feel like it, can you tell us about the challenges you faced growing up? Maybe the things people don't often see behind the scenes." Keanu hesitated, his jaw tightening subtly, a flicker of hesitation crossing his face. "Life wasn't always easy," he admitted. "Moving so much, trying to find a place to belong, it can be disorienting. But my mother made sure we were grounded, taught us the importance of integrity and compassion." His words were measured, carefully chosen to reveal some of the hardship without opening doors he wasn't ready to unlock. The audience listened intently, sensing the vulnerability but also the strength behind his calm exterior. Jimmy nodded with understanding. "Those lessons clearly stayed with you. You've carried that spirit throughout your career, haven't you?" Keanu's eyes met Jimmy's with quiet affirmation. "I try to live by those values every day. It's not always easy, but it's what matters most to me." The audience responded with warm applause once again, drawn in by the authenticity radiating from the exchange. Jimmy, sensing the fragile balance, chose his next words carefully. You've mentioned your mother and sister, but I hope you don't mind if I ask, how did your father fit into all of this? At the mention of his father, the atmosphere shifted palpably. Keanu's posture changed instantly. His breathing slowed, his hands clenched lightly on his lap, the muscles in his face tightening as if bracing for a difficult path. The subtle but unmistakable signs told the audience this was a boundary he had long protected. Keanu took a moment, eyes lowering as he chose his words with great care. "My father wasn't really part of the picture," he said quietly. "He left when I was very young." The studio fell into a hush, the weight of those simple words sinking deeply. Even though many in the audience may have known fragments of Keanu's story, hearing it spoken so plainly was jarring. Jimmy leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "That must have been incredibly hard. Can you tell us a little more about what that was like for you?" Keanu's gaze lifted briefly, dark eyes shimmering with a quiet pain. "It's something I haven't spoken about much. It's a wound that stayed with me for a long time, but my mother did everything she could to shield me from it, to give me a sense of love and stability." The audience remained silent, the empathy in the room thick and palpable. It was clear that this wasn't just another interview. This was an intimate conversation about the fractures and scars that shaped a life. Jimmy nodded slowly, respectful but gently encouraging. "If it's too much, I understand, but sometimes sharing helps. You don't have to say anything you're not ready to." Keanu gave a small, appreciative nod. "Thank you. It's not easy, but I think it's important to be honest about the things that shape us, even the difficult parts." The room seemed to exhale collectively, as if invited into a rare moment of vulnerability. Jimmy's next question lingered in the air, a bridge to deeper revelations yet to come. The audience sat captivated, waiting in respectful silence as the conversation held its delicate balance, poised between what had been shared and what still remained behind closed doors. Keanu's voice grew softer, more reflective. "My childhood wasn't what most people would expect. It was filled with love from my mother and sister, but also a sense of absence. An absence I carried quietly." Jimmy nodded, understanding the gravity of those words. "Thank you for sharing that with us, Keanu. It's clear your journey has been marked by both love and pain." The applause was gentle but sincere, echoing the collective respect for the man who had just revealed so much with such grace. And with that, the interview lingered on the cusp of even deeper truths that would soon emerge, changing the course of the evening in ways no one anticipated. Jimmy Kimmel shifted slightly in his seat, the atmosphere in the studio growing heavier with anticipation. The audience, once lively and animated, had settled into an almost reverent silence. Jimmy's next question was delicate, but he knew it was one that many viewers longed to hear answered. The question about Keanu's father. He chose his words carefully, his voice softening with genuine respect and empathy. "Keanu," Jimmy began, "we've talked a lot about your incredible career, your philosophy on life, and the influence your mother had on you. But I want to ask about your father's role during your childhood. Can you share a little about that?" The question lingered in the air, weighty and profound, like a pebble dropped into still water. The entire studio seemed to hold its breath. There was a moment of silence so deep that even the smallest sound, the faint rustle of a program, the subtle shift of a chair, was noticeable. The audience, sensing the gravity of the moment, remained utterly still, eyes fixed on Keanu. The usual chatter and laughter were absent, replaced by a heavy anticipation that something significant was about to unfold. Keanu's breathing slowed, deepening as he prepared himself to answer. His gaze drifted slightly, not meeting Jimmy's directly, but focusing beyond him, perhaps looking inward or at memories long buried. There was a visible change in his demeanor, a stillness that suggested he was bracing for the emotional weight of what he was about to reveal. After a brief pause, Keanu spoke quietly but firmly. My father wasn't really part of the picture. The simplicity of the statement belied the profound pain it contained. Those words carried an emotional gravity that resonated through the room. It was as if a door had opened just enough for a glimpse of a long, hidden truth, but still remained mostly closed. Jimmy leaned forward slightly, his expression softening with sympathy. Would you be willing to tell us a little more about that? He asked gently. I think many people would want to understand what that meant for you. Keanu's jaw tightened imperceptibly, a sign of the internal struggle that anyone familiar with his public appearances would recognize. He was faced with the choice of opening a deeply personal wound or retreating into silence, a defense he had relied on for decades. But something in the quietness of the studio, the respect of the moment, gave him permission to speak further. My father, Keanu began again, was absent in every way that matters. He left when I was very young, when I was 3 years old. His voice remained calm, but the underlying sadness was unmistakable. The studio was silent except for his words, which seemed to hang in the air like fragile glass, beautiful but vulnerable. The audience absorbed the weight of that absence. For many, it was a moment of shared understanding. The pain of missing a parent, the questions left unanswered, the childhood shaped by someone who was not there. Yet, for Keanu, this was not just a simple absence. It was a foundational part of his story, something he had carried quietly for nearly 6 decades. Jimmy's voice was soft, almost reverent as he continued. That must have been incredibly difficult to grow up with. How did that shape your early years, your sense of self? Keanu's eyes flickered with emotion, but his composure remained intact. It's hard to explain, he said slowly. When you're that young, you try to make sense of things in your own way. My mother did her best to shield me from the pain of it all, to make sure I felt loved and safe, but there was always that sense of something missing. A silence where my father should have been. The room felt suspended in time. The usual glow of the studio lights seemed dimmer, more intimate, as if the space itself was honoring Keanu's vulnerability. The audience's rapt attention was a testament to the power of honest storytelling, a moment where celebrity peeled back to reveal raw humanity. Jimmy nodded, his face reflecting a mixture of respect and empathy. Your mother sounds like an incredible woman, Keanu. To raise 2 children on her own and keep that love alive must have taken immense strength. She was remarkable, Keanu agreed, his voice softening. Her strength was the foundation of everything I am. She taught me how to be kind, how to persevere. She gave me the tools to survive the absence, but she couldn't fill the void completely. Jimmy's question hung in the air, unspoken but understood. What was it like to grow up feeling incomplete, to wonder about the parent who chose to leave? Keanu's breath hitched slightly, a subtle but clear sign of the pain beneath the surface. There were so many questions, he confessed. Why was he gone? Did I do something wrong? Was I not enough? Those questions stay with you, even when you grow up and find success and happiness. They don't just disappear. The honesty of his words sent a ripple through the audience, many of whom had experienced similar feelings of abandonment or loss. There was a collective empathy, an unspoken acknowledgement that Keanu's story, though unique in its details, touched on a universal human experience. Jimmy's voice grew softer, almost hesitant, as if sensing the fragility of the moment. Have you ever had the chance to talk to him about any of this? Keanu's eyes darkened briefly, and his shoulders stiffened in response. No, he said simply. There was never an opportunity, and honestly, I don't think there ever will be. The audience remained silent, absorbing the finality of his statement. For someone as private as Keanu, this was as close to a public confession as anyone had ever heard. The pain of a fractured family, of unanswered questions, had been carefully hidden away for years. Now, it was laid bare for all to see. Jimmy leaned back, collecting his thoughts, careful not to press too hard. "That's understandable," he said gently. "It's a deeply personal subject, and you've shared more than many would be willing to." Keanu nodded, appreciating the respect. "Thank you. It's not easy to speak about, but sometimes being honest about the hard parts helps us heal, or at least helps others who might be going through something similar." There was a pause as the room filled with a quiet stillness, the weight of what had been shared settling like a delicate fog. The audience seemed to hold their collective breath, unsure of what might come next. Jimmy glanced at his notes, but kept his eyes on Keanu. "If you're comfortable, can you tell us how you managed to find your way, despite those early challenges?" Keanu considered the question carefully. "I focused on the things I could control. My work, my values, the relationships I did have. My mother and sister were my anchors, and I learned to create my own path, even when the foundation felt shaky." He paused, then added with quiet strength, "It wasn't easy, but it was necessary." The sincerity in his voice struck a chord with everyone watching. Keanu's resilience shone through, a testament to the power of inner strength, even in the face of deep wounds. Jimmy smiled gently. "Your story is one of courage, Keanu. Thank you for trusting us with it." The applause that followed was warm and heartfelt, the studio honoring the bravery it took for Keanu to share such a vulnerable part of himself. Yet beneath the applause, a tension lingered, an unspoken understanding that there was more to come. The deeper layers of Keanu's story, the pain long buried, were still waiting to be uncovered. The conversation shifted briefly to lighter topics, but the emotional weight remained, a silent thread weaving through every word. The audience remained captivated, aware that they were witnessing something rare, not just an interview, but a profound moment of truth. As the segment drew to a close, Jimmy offered one final question, his voice steady but gentle. "Keanu, your journey inspires so many. Is there anything you'd want people to know about the importance of family, even when it's complicated?" Keanu's eyes glistened with unspoken emotion. "Family isn't always perfect," he said softly. "Sometimes it's messy, painful, but it's what shapes us, for better or worse. We carry those experiences with us, and it's up to us how we let them define us." The audience responded with a deep, sincere applause, the room filled with respect and empathy. Keanu's words echoed beyond the studio walls, resonating with anyone who has ever struggled with love, loss, and belonging. And with that, the segment gently transitioned toward the next phase of the interview, the emotional threshold having been crossed. The air was charged with anticipation, the audience waiting to see what revelations the rest of the night would bring. Keanu's jaw tightened subtly, a quiet but unmistakable sign of discomfort that those familiar with him would recognize instantly. The room's energy shifted as if a storm was gathering just beneath the calm surface. Though his voice remained steady and calm, there was a firmness now that sent a clear message. This was territory Keanu rarely, if ever, ventured into publicly. The weight of decades of silence hovered palpably around him. "I don't often talk about these things," Keanu said, his tone measured but resolute. The words hung in the air like a delicate yet firm boundary, signaling his need to protect a part of himself that had remained private for too long. His gaze flicked briefly toward Jimmy, an unspoken request passing between them. This was not a subject he wished to explore tonight. Jimmy's expression softened, understanding the gravity of the moment but still hoping to tread carefully. "I get it, Keanu," he said gently. "Some things are deeply personal, and I respect that. We can shift gears if you'd like." His voice carried the practiced empathy of a seasoned interviewer, always ready to navigate the delicate balance between curiosity and respect. Yet, even as Jimmy offered an escape route from the emotional intensity, he couldn't fully let go of the thread he had just begun to unravel. "But I think there's something powerful about sharing these stories," he continued, his voice lowering slightly. "So many people out there feel isolated by their own experiences. Sometimes, hearing someone else's journey can remind them they're not alone." The audience remained silent, hanging on every word, sensing the tension rising like a tide ready to break. Keanu's hands, which had been resting quietly on his knees, now gripped them with a subtle intensity that betrayed the internal struggle he was facing. The decades of silence, the careful construction of walls around this wound, were becoming visible cracks. Keanu exhaled slowly, a breath that seemed to carry the weight of years spent carrying burdens in solitude. "There are some things that are better left private," he said quietly, almost to himself. The fragility in his voice was a stark contrast to the calm exterior he maintained. It was a rare glimpse behind the carefully guarded persona he presented to the world. The studio lights seemed to dim slightly as the moment deepened, creating an intimate atmosphere, charged with unspoken emotions. Viewers at home and those sitting in the audience could feel the emotional gravity settling over the room like a heavy fog. This was no longer just an interview, it was a delicate dance around a wound that had shaped much of Keanu's life. Jimmy nodded slowly, showing his respect for the line that had been drawn, but also his sincere wish to understand. "I appreciate your honesty, Keanu," he said softly. "It takes a lot of strength to even hint at these things." His voice was sincere, carrying the weight of shared human experience, the universal struggle to protect oneself while yearning for connection. Keanu's eyes darkened for a moment, the hint of a storm behind them. "It's not that I don't want to connect," he replied. "It's just, some wounds are so deep that sharing them doesn't always heal. Sometimes it just reopens the pain." His hands loosened their grip on his knees, but remained tense enough to show the lingering discomfort. The audience absorbed his words in silence, each person grappling with the vulnerability displayed before them. Keanu's admission was a quiet rebellion against the expectation that public figures must lay bare every part of themselves for the sake of entertainment or empathy. It was a reminder that some struggles remain fiercely personal, even amid the spotlight. Jimmy shifted slightly, sensing the fragility of the moment, but also the importance of the conversation. "Do you think that's part of what keeps these wounds so silent? The fear that opening up might just bring more hurt instead of healing?" he asked, his tone gentle, inviting. Keanu nodded slowly. "Yes," he said simply. "There's always that risk. The world sees vulnerability as weakness sometimes. It's easier to keep the pain locked away than to expose it and risk being misunderstood or judged." His voice carried a hint of weariness, the kind that comes from years of carefully measured exposure. The tension in the studio was palpable now, thick enough to be cut with a knife. The viewers watching at home could almost feel the invisible walls Keanu had constructed over decades trembling under the weight of these probing questions. Yet, despite the discomfort, there was a strange beauty in this raw honesty, a glimpse into the human spirit's resilience. Jimmy's eyes softened, a genuine empathy shining through. "You've lived your life with a grace and humility that's inspired so many. Yet, here we are, witnessing the strength it takes to protect your own heart." He paused, letting the words settle. "Do you ever feel like the world expects too much from you? To always be the strong one?" Keanu's expression was thoughtful. "Often," he admitted. "There's this image people have of me, the calm, composed figure who handles everything with quiet dignity. But that's just one part of me. Behind the scenes, it's a constant effort to keep everything together." His hands briefly clasped together, a subtle gesture of self-comfort. The studio audience remained silent, captivated by the layers of vulnerability unfolding before them. It was a side of Keanu rarely seen, Not the movie star, but the man, wrestling with the complexities of pain and privacy. Jimmy leaned forward again, careful not to push too hard, but seeking to honor the conversation's depth. "Thank you for trusting us with this glimpse," he said earnestly. "It's a reminder that behind every public figure is a private person, with their own stories, struggles, and boundaries." Keanu gave a small, appreciative nod. "Thank you for understanding," he said. "It's not easy, but it's important to acknowledge that some parts of our lives aren't for public consumption. They belong to us." His voice was steady, but the undercurrent of emotion was unmistakable. The moment lingered, a delicate balance between respect and curiosity. The audience felt privileged to witness this rare unveiling, a chapter of Keanu's story that had long remained unwritten in public. Jimmy shifted in his chair, signaling a gentle change of subject. "Maybe we can talk about something lighter for a bit," he suggested with a warm smile. "Like some of the fun moments from your latest film. Those always make for great stories." Keanu returned the smile, grateful for the reprieve. "Absolutely," he replied. "There are plenty of those." His tone lightened, the weight momentarily lifting as they transitioned back to the familiar territory of movie sets and behind-the-scenes anecdotes. Yet despite the shift, the emotional resonance of what had just been shared lingered. The audience remained quietly reflective, aware that the night's conversation had moved beyond typical interview fare and into something far more profound. As the segment continued, Keanu's composure returned, though a subtle vulnerability remained, like a soft echo beneath the surface. It was a testament to his strength that he could navigate these moments with such grace. Jimmy, ever the skilled host, balanced humor and sensitivity with ease, guiding the conversation with the deft touch of someone who understood the importance of honoring boundaries while encouraging openness. The audience responded warmly, laughter and applause punctuating the lighter stories. But beneath it all was a newfound respect for the man who had just shared so much without saying too much. The studio lights glowed softly, casting gentle shadows that mirrored the complexity of the dialogue unfolding. It was a night that would linger in the minds of all present, a night when silence and speech intertwined to reveal the humanity behind the celebrity. As the cameras rolled, capturing every nuance, it was clear that this interview was unlike any other, a rare glimpse into the private world of Keanu Reeves, where strength and vulnerability coexist in delicate balance. The segment drew to a close, leaving the audience anticipating what might come next, the emotional journey far from over. Jimmy leaned forward slightly, a subtle shift that signaled he was about to bring up something significant. His voice was calm but steady as he began. "Keanu, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but our research team has uncovered some new details about your father, Samuel Nolan Reeves." The name landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water, its ripples immediately felt. Keanu's body tensed noticeably. His eyes flicked downward, and for a brief moment, the air seemed to thicken with a silent intensity. It was clear that hearing the full name spoken aloud was more than just a formality. It was a trigger that had been carefully avoided for decades. The studio audience, perceptive and silent, sensed the shift immediately. Jimmy, however, pressed on gently. "We learned he was a geologist. He worked in some pretty fascinating places around the world. It's a side of his life most people wouldn't know about." His words were meant to be informative, perhaps even humanizing, but the impact on Keanu was undeniable. The actor's face showed a mixture of emotions: surprise, hesitation, and something heavier, like a buried wound being poked. Keanu's jaw tightened once again, a visible sign of his internal struggle. "Jimmy," he said quietly, "I really would prefer not to discuss this." His voice was calm but firm, a clear boundary being drawn. The room fell into a heavier silence, the kind that follows when a guest's limits are respectfully but unmistakably set. Yet Jimmy, caught in the momentum of the interview and the natural curiosity that drives his craft, didn't fully step back. "I understand, Keanu," he replied softly, "but I think people would find it interesting to know more about that part of your story. It adds depth to what we think we know." There was an earnestness in his tone, a belief that sharing more could connect viewers to the man behind the fame in a new way. Keanu's hands clenched briefly in his lap, a subtle but clear sign that the emotional pressure was mounting. "There are some things that have been silent for a long time," he said carefully. "And silence can sometimes be a form of protection." The tension in the room grew almost tangible, like a tightly wound wire ready to snap under the strain of unspoken pain. The audience, attentive and respectful, remained hushed, caught in the unfolding drama of a story far deeper than any typical late-night interview. They could feel the gravity of the moment, the invisible barrier that separated the public image from the private reality. Jimmy nodded, acknowledging Keanu's words, but also feeling the weight of his own responsibility as a host. "I get that. It's just that your father's story isn't just about absence. It's about a life that was lived, and the choices that affected you." He paused, his eyes searching Keanu's face for a sign to proceed or retreat. Keanu's gaze lifted slowly, meeting Jimmy's with a mixture of resolve and vulnerability. "He had a life, yes," Keanu admitted, his voice quieter now. "But the fact that he had a life doesn't change the fact that he chose not to be part of mine." The words were simple but loaded with decades of hurt and unanswered questions. The room was silent except for the hum of the studio lights. Even the crew seemed to pause, sensing they were witnessing something beyond routine entertainment. Keanu's composure, so carefully maintained, was showing cracks that few had ever seen before. Jimmy swallowed, sensing he was treading on fragile ground. "Sometimes understanding the full story can bring closure," he offered tentatively. "Maybe there were circumstances we don't know about, reasons for his absence that might help you find some peace." His voice was gentle, an invitation rather than a demand. Keanu's eyes darkened, and a shadow crossed his face. "Closure," he repeated softly, almost to himself. "When someone walks away from their 3-year-old child and never looks back, the only closure is accepting that some people are incapable of love." The honesty of his statement struck the room like a thunderclap. A hush fell over the audience. This wasn't the polished, diplomatic Keanu they were used to seeing. This was a man laying bare a raw truth that many had guessed, but few had heard articulated so powerfully. The tension in the studio tightened, heavy and electric. Jimmy shifted uncomfortably, realizing he may have pushed too far, but struggling with how to navigate the live moment. "Keanu, I didn't mean to imply," he began, but Keanu interrupted him sharply. "You didn't mean to imply," Keanu said, his voice now carrying a sharp intensity that commanded attention. "You used my private pain for entertainment value. You took something I've spent 60 years protecting and turned it into content for your show." His words were not just a rebuke, but a profound indictment of a culture that often exploits personal trauma for ratings. The studio audience sat frozen, some with tears in their eyes, as they absorbed the magnitude of what was happening. This wasn't just an interview unraveling. It was a man confronting his deepest wounds on national television. Keanu's breathing shifted into the controlled rhythm of someone who had learned meditation to cope with stress, but even those techniques felt insufficient now. Memories surged like waves, unwanted, overwhelming, and raw. The room seemed to pulse with the intensity of his inner turmoil. He recalled, in a whisper, being 3 years old and asking his mother why other children had fathers who came to their school events, who taught them how to throw balls, who read them bedtime stories. He remembered Patricia's gentle explanations, that families come in many forms, that love is not limited, that he was special because of his strong mother. But even a child understood abandonment at a cellular level. Even a child who grew to be successful, beloved and accomplished, carried the undeniable truth that the first man he ever loved had chosen to leave and never return. Jimmy's voice softened with genuine concern. "Keanu, I can see this is really difficult. We can change the subject if you want." The offer felt like both a relief and a subtle pressure to retreat. Keanu recognized the pattern, the interviewer pressing, then offering an escape, as if to undo the intrusion. "You don't get to do that," Keanu said quietly, his voice steady but piercing. "You don't get to slice someone open and then offer to stop when you realize you've gone too deep." Jimmy shifted uneasily, the gravity of the moment dawning on him. This wasn't just a reluctant celebrity. This was a man whose wounds ran far deeper than he had imagined. "I understand you're upset," Jimmy began carefully, "but I think the audience would appreciate—" "Your audience doesn't get to appreciate my pain," Keanu interrupted. "They don't get to consume my trauma as entertainment." The word trauma echoed in the studio, a confession and a warning. Keanu's hands, which had been still moments before, now trembled slightly. Not from nerves, but from the effort of holding back the flood of emotion built up over 6 decades. "Do you know what it's like?" he whispered, voice breaking but filled with power. "To spend your entire life wondering what you did wrong at 3 years old that made your father decide you weren't worth staying for?" The question hit the room like a physical blow. Even the production crew exchanged uneasy glances, realizing they were witnessing something far beyond typical television drama. Keanu continued, voice raw and laden with pain. "I achieved everything the world says should make you happy. Success, fame, financial security, professional recognition, but I still carry this certainty in my chest, that I am fundamentally unlovable because the first person who was supposed to love me chose not to." Jimmy's face showed genuine horror as he absorbed the depth of what his questions had unleashed. This wasn't vulnerability performed for sympathy. It was the unmasking of a lifetime's hidden wound, exposed in real time. "I'm sorry," Jimmy said softly, sincerity in his tone. "I had no idea." "You had no idea," Keanu replied quietly, "because you never asked if this was something I was willing to discuss. You decided your show's need for content was more important than my right to keep some things private." The studio audience remained in stunned silence, grasping that they were witnessing an unprecedented moment. Not just a celebrity losing composure, but a human confronting the foundational wound of his existence. Keanu sat on the edge of breaking down or breaking free, his chest rising and falling with slow, deliberate breaths, his dark eyes fixed beyond the cameras, beyond the studio, beyond the present moment. "You want to know about my father?" he asked, voice carrying a weight that made everyone lean forward involuntarily. Jimmy started to respond, perhaps to offer a retreat, but something in Keanu's expression stopped him. This was not a request for permission, but a declaration of intent. "Samuel Nolan Reeves, Jr., Keanu said, pronouncing his father's full name with careful precision. "Born in Hawaii, worked as a geologist, had a son named Keanu when he was 22. Each fact dropped like a stone into still water, ripples spreading instead of fading. And when that son was 3, Keanu continued, voice gaining strength even as tears began to form, Samuel decided that being a father was inconvenient, not impossible, not tragic, just inconvenient. The word inconvenient carried more weight than any dramatic explanation. It implied not a man overcome by circumstance, but someone who simply did not find fatherhood worth the effort. "Hell didn't die," Keanu said, voice now carrying a fierce intensity that transformed the studio atmosphere. "He didn't get deployed overseas. He didn't have a nervous breakdown. He didn't face some insurmountable tragedy that prevented him from being present. He just left." The single word "left" echoed like an accusation, a condemnation of absent fathers everywhere. "Do you know what that does to a child?" Keanu asked, addressing Jimmy but seeming to speak to everyone listening. "When someone who's supposed to love you chooses not to be in the same room as you. When their absence becomes the loudest presence in your life." Jimmy's face showed genuine distress, recognizing that he had unleashed something far beyond what he had anticipated. This was no longer entertainment. It was witnessing a profound human wound examined in real time. Keanu's voice took on a hard edge as he spoke, the weight of decades pressing down with every word. "My father had opportunities," he began, his tone steady but resolute. "He achieved things, worked in fascinating places, made a name for himself in his field. But none of that excuses what he chose to do or didn't do." His gaze was steady, though shadows flickered behind his eyes. The room, once alive with the usual hum of entertainment and light banter, grew quiet. The audience shifted in their seats, some swallowing hard, others blinking back tears. They were witnessing a transformation, a peeling away of the polished surface to reveal raw human reality beneath. Jimmy nodded slowly, attempting to respond with a measured perspective. "Sometimes," he offered gently, "finding understanding in those choices can bring closure, help us move forward." His words, though intended as comfort, landed awkwardly, reverberating through the space like a discordant note. Keanu's hands clenched briefly in his lap. He leaned forward just slightly, voice ringing clear and strong. "Closure," he repeated, voice rising with intensity that silenced the room. "When someone leaves their 3-year-old child and never looks back, the only closure is accepting that some people are incapable of love." The statement cut deep, not just into the studio's charged atmosphere, but into the hearts of everyone listening. A few audience members wiped tears from their eyes. Others stared in stunned silence, feeling the weight of the truth Keanu laid bare. The emotion was palpable, thickening the air with a solemnity that few late-night interviews ever reached. Jimmy swallowed, momentarily at a loss. Keanu, I didn't mean to," he started. But Keanu raised a hand to gently halt him. The power in that small gesture demanded respect and pause. "You didn't mean to what?" Keanu asked, quietly but firmly. "Use my life as entertainment? Mine and countless others' pain? For ratings?" His eyes locked on Jimmy's, steady and unflinching, exposing a vulnerability that had been hidden for far too long. The silence stretched. For a moment, all that could be heard was the soft hum of the studio equipment, the barely perceptible shift of air as breaths were held. The audience was no longer passive. They were witnesses to a man's unfiltered pain and unvarnished truth. Keanu's voice softened slightly, fatigue and sorrow threading through the strength. "You see, it's easy to tell stories about success and fame, but the silence about what's behind those stories, that's what breaks you." His words carried the weight of a lifetime spent hiding wounds beneath accolades and applause. He paused, gathering his thoughts before continuing. "I spent years trying to understand, making up stories to fill the void. Maybe he was a spy, unable to contact us for security reasons. Maybe he was in witness protection. Maybe he was searching for a cure, and he couldn't risk exposing us." A faint, bitter smile flickered briefly, but was quickly replaced by raw emotion. "But the truth," Keanu said, voice breaking, "the truth was simpler and crueler. He just didn't want to be my father. I wasn't worth the inconvenience of staying." The room seemed to contract around the weight of those words, the honesty shattering the illusion of celebrity and vulnerability. Some in the audience audibly sobbed. Others looked down, tears streaming silently. The vulnerability was not weakness, but an unguarded strength that resonated deeply with those who had faced similar wounds. Jimmy, regaining composure, sought to bridge the gap. "Keanu, I'm so sorry, I had no idea." His apology sounded sincere but also inadequate. a small gesture against the magnitude of the moment. Keanu nodded slowly. "You didn't?" he agreed softly. "Because you never asked if I was willing to share this. You decided that your show's need for content outweighed my right to privacy." The accusation hung in the air like a verdict, exposing a stark truth about the entertainment world's hunger for personal revelations. The atmosphere was charged with a mix of empathy, discomfort, and respect. This was not just a celebrity breaking down. It was a man reclaiming his story on his terms. Keanu took a deep breath, his voice steadying as he prepared to make a point that would linger long after the cameras stopped rolling. "For years, I believed I was unlovable, that my father's choice meant I was flawed, broken somehow." His hands trembled slightly, betraying the emotional effort of speaking truths long buried. "But I've come to realize," he said, "you don't become unlovable. You just learn that some people are incapable of love." His eyes scanned the studio, meeting those of the audience members with a gentle but firm gaze, offering solace and solidarity. The audience sat in quiet reverence, absorbing the profound clarity of his statement. The room felt like a shared space of healing, where personal pain was no longer a secret burden, but a bridge connecting strangers. Jimmy, visibly moved, nodded again. "Thank you for sharing that, Keanu. It's a powerful reminder of the resilience behind the public persona." His voice was softer now, stripped of pretense, reflecting genuine admiration. Keanu offered a small, weary smile. "Thank you for listening." The simplicity of those words belied their depth, a recognition of being truly seen and heard. The segment ended not with applause or cheers, but with a heavy, thoughtful silence. The cameras continued rolling, capturing a moment of unguarded humanity rarely seen on television. Outside the studio, viewers at home were equally affected. Social media buzzed not with gossip, but with conversations about abandonment, resilience, and the need for compassion. Mental health advocates praised Keanu's courage, highlighting how his honesty gave voice to those who suffered in silence. Discussions about the ethics of celebrity interviews sparked, questioning the balance between public curiosity and personal boundaries. Back in the studio, as the lights dimmed and the crew prepared for a commercial break, the weight of the moment lingered. Keanu sat quietly, the facade of the polished actor temporarily replaced by a man confronting the echoes of his past. Jimmy took a moment off camera to reflect on the power and responsibility inherent in his role. The interview had taken an unexpected turn, revealing truths that transcended entertainment. For Keanu, the experience was both painful and liberating. Speaking about the wound that shaped him was a step toward healing, even if the path ahead remained uncertain. As the show resumed, the usual rhythm felt changed, more subdued, more sincere. The audience remained silent, their hearts touched by the courage they had witnessed. Keanu's story reminded everyone that behind every public figure is a human being, shaped by love and loss, triumph and pain. The conversation about abandonment and healing had begun, not just in the studio, but in the hearts of those watching. It was a moment of connection, a testament to the power of truth spoken in vulnerability. Keanu's carefully built composure began to crumble. For years, he had maintained a calm, collected presence in the public eye, a man who could handle pressure with grace, who chose his words with care, and who kept the most painful parts of his life locked away deep inside. But now, under the glaring studio lights and with millions watching, the weight of decades of silence pressed down hard on him. His breathing, once even and measured, grew heavier and uneven. The slight tremor in his voice betrayed the emotional storm brewing beneath the surface. "You wanted a story about my father for your show," Keanu said quietly, his voice steady but edged with pain. "But you didn't want to know what that story would cost me to tell." Those words settled into the room like a solemn declaration, demanding attention and respect. The studio lights, which moments before seemed warm and welcoming, now felt unbearably bright, almost hostile. The once familiar space felt confined, as though the walls themselves were closing in, trapping Keanu in a spotlight that had never been his choice. The laughter and applause that had filled the room earlier were gone, replaced by a heavy silence that seemed to hold its breath. Keanu closed his eyes briefly and inhaled deeply, trying to regain control. He turned to a meditation technique he had practiced for years, slow, deliberate breaths to center himself. But even this grounding exercise could not fully protect him from the flood of emotions that surged forward, memories and feelings he had long suppressed. Everyday life as he knew. In his mind, he was no longer sitting on a television set. Instead, he was transported back to his childhood. A small boy standing beside his mother, Patricia, in a dimly lit room. Her eyes were tired but full of determination, her presence the only constant in a world that often felt uncertain and cold. He recalled the quiet nights filled with whispered reassurances, when questions about his father were met with silence or gentle deflections. He remembered the confusion he felt watching other children talk about their dads. Fathers who came to school plays, taught them to throw baseballs, and read them bedtime stories. These were things Keanu had never experienced, a painful absence that shaped him in ways few could see. That loneliness settled deep inside him, a silent ache that never quite left, no matter how many accolades or successes he achieved as an adult. It was a wound carried in the chest, heavy and invisible, influencing every step he took. Back in the studio, the audience sat in stunned silence, sensing the depth of the moment unfolding before them. The polished surface of celebrity was stripped away, revealing a man who had carried immense pain in private for decades. There was a raw honesty in Keanu's voice, a vulnerability that few had ever witnessed. Jimmy shifted uneasily in his chair, the confident interviewer suddenly unsure of how to proceed. He watched as Keanu, normally composed and measured, confronted a part of himself that had long been hidden from the world. The weight of the moment was unmistakable. Keanu's voice broke the silence again, softer this time but no less powerful. "This isn't entertainment," he said, his tone low and serious. "This is my life. Real, painful, and often lonely." His words were more than a confession. They were a plea for understanding, reaching out to anyone who had ever felt unseen or unheard. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every subtle change in Keanu's expression, the slight quiver of his lips, the moisture gathering in his eyes, the tension in his jaw. For viewers at home, this was more than a television interview. It was a window into a deeply personal struggle, one that transcended fame and fortune. Taking another deep breath, Keanu tried to steady himself. "I was raised to be strong, to keep my pain hidden," he admitted. "But tonight, I see that silence only makes the wound worse." Tears began to fall quietly down his cheeks, tracing paths that had long been denied expression. The studio remained still, the audience moved by the courage it took for Keanu to share this vulnerable truth. It was a reminder that beneath every public persona is a human being carrying their own hidden battles, often in solitude. As the emotional wave began to subside, Keanu looked at Jimmy once more, his gaze steady and unwavering. "I don't want this pain to be turned into entertainment," he said firmly. "I want it to be understood and respected." His statement was a call for empathy, a challenge to the culture that too often exploits personal trauma for ratings and clicks. In that charged moment, the roles of interviewer and guest blurred, replaced by a shared humanity that transcended the scripted nature of late-night television. The studio had become a sacred space of truth and vulnerability, however uncomfortable. For Keanu, this breaking point was not a defeat but a turning point, a chance to reclaim his narrative, to speak his truth on his own terms, and to confront the culture that profited from silence and spectacle alike. The audience, both present and watching from afar, felt the profound impact of his honesty. Conversations about abandonment, trauma, and healing began to emerge in the wake of his revelation, creating ripples far beyond the studio walls. Keanu's breaking point was also a breakthrough, a moment of liberation not only for himself but for anyone who recognized their own pain in his words. It was a reminder that healing begins when silence ends, and that courage is found in speaking what has long been unsaid. The cameras continued to capture the fragile yet powerful scene. The man who had carried so much finally letting some of it go. The studio lights softened slightly, as if recognizing the significance of the moment. Keanu wiped the tears from his face, taking one last steadying breath. His voice, though still trembling, was filled with quiet strength. "This is my truth," he said, "and it's time it was heard." The room remained silent, the audience absorbing the weight of those words. It was a moment that would linger in their memories long after the show ended. In that silence, the divide between celebrity and person vanished. Keanu Reeves was not just a star on a stage. He was a man who had faced his deepest wounds in public and dared to speak them aloud. As the segment came to a close, the emotional energy in the room settled into a quiet reverence. The impact of Keanu's courage was undeniable, a reminder that behind every story lies a human heart, capable of pain, resilience, and healing. The night's broadcast ended, but the conversation had only just begun. Keanu's willingness to confront his past opened the door for others to share their own stories, to break free from isolation, and to find solace in shared experience. His breaking point became a beacon of hope, a symbol of the power that comes from honesty and vulnerability. It was a testament to the strength found not in hiding pain, but in facing it head-on. And for everyone watching, it was a profound lesson that the most important stories are those told from the heart, no matter how difficult they may be. The air in the studio was thick with tension as Jimmy Kimmel finally found his voice. His usual ease was gone, replaced by a quiet sincerity that reflected the gravity of the moment. "Keanu," Jimmy began, his tone gentle but filled with genuine regret, "I'm truly sorry. I underestimated how deeply my questions would affect you." The apology hung in the room like a fragile truce, fragile yet necessary. For years, Jimmy had mastered the art of drawing stories from celebrities, knowing how to balance entertainment with vulnerability. But tonight, he realized he had crossed an invisible line, a boundary Keanu had guarded fiercely for decades. The apology was not just about the interview, it was an acknowledgement of the human pain he had inadvertently stirred. Keanu listened, his eyes steady but heavy. The studio lights cast soft shadows on his face, highlighting the raw honesty etched in every line. After a moment of silence, he responded, not with anger, but with a calm and cutting clarity that silenced the room. "Jimmy, I'm not apologizing for answering," he said quietly, voice carrying a quiet strength. "I'm apologizing for the way you asked." The distinction was subtle yet profound, shifting the focus from the act of sharing to the manner in which the sharing was demanded. Keanu was pointing to something deeper than regret, a fundamental difference between mere curiosity and true empathy, between the thirst for content and the respect for personal pain. "You see," Keanu continued, his gaze sweeping across the audience, "there's a world of difference between wanting to know someone's story because you care and wanting to extract it because it sells." His words were not accusations but lessons, carefully measured and powerful. Curiosity without care becomes exploitation. The audience remained silent, absorbed by the gravity of his confession. The cameras captured every nuance, the slight tremble in his hands, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the weight behind each word. It was a moment of unfiltered truth, rare and raw, that transcended the usual polished veneer of celebrity interviews. He was putting everything out. Keanu's voice softened as he revealed the real cost of the interview. The violation of boundaries he had maintained for nearly 60 years. This interview, it wasn't just a conversation. It was a demand to expose parts of myself I never agreed to share. His words echoed through the studio, stirring a collective understanding among those present. He described how the relentless pursuit of content often ignores the human behind the story, the emotions, the scars, and the silent battles fought away from the public eye. It's easy to forget that behind every headline, every viral clip, there's a person with a life, with pain, with memories they might not want to relive. Keanu's admission was not just personal. It was a critique of an entire industry driven by ratings and sensationalism. The message was clear. Empathy must precede inquiry. Respect must come before revelation. And consent is not just a formality, it is a necessity. The atmosphere in the studio shifted palpably. Where once there had been anticipation for entertainment, now there was a profound respect for vulnerability. Audience members leaned forward, some wiping away tears, others nodding quietly in recognition. This was more than an interview. It was a rare glimpse into the human soul. Jimmy's expression mirrored this transformation. The confident host, usually quick with a joke or a clever remark, now sat humbled and attentive. He understood, perhaps for the first time, the heavy responsibility carried by those who hold a microphone and a platform. Keanu looked directly at Jimmy, his eyes steady. "I want everyone here to understand something important," he said, voice steady but carrying immense weight. "When you sit across from someone and ask them to share their pain, you must first ask yourself, are you ready to listen with compassion? Or are you simply waiting for your next headline?" The question resonated deeply. It challenged not only the entertainment industry but each person watching, inviting reflection on how we consume stories and the humanity behind them. Keanu's words became a call for change. "There is dignity in choosing when and how to share your story," he continued, "and there is strength in saying no when you're not ready." His statement was both personal and universal, offering empowerment to anyone who has ever felt pressured to expose their pain. The silence in the studio was thick with emotion as Keanu's gaze moved from the cameras to the audience. He saw faces filled with empathy and understanding, people recognizing the courage it took to speak such truths aloud. He wiped a tear from his cheek, the studio lights reflecting the vulnerability and resilience in his expression. "Your stories, your pain, your healing, they belong to you," Keanu said softly. "Not to be packaged, exploited, or consumed, but to be honored and respected." This moment of honesty shifted the energy in the room. It was a profound reminder that behind every public persona is a private life, complex and often fragile. Keanu had stripped away the layers of fame to reveal a raw and authentic human experience. Jimmy nodded slowly, the apology now a deeper acknowledgement. "Thank you for sharing that, Keanu. I promise to carry that lesson with me." His voice was quieter, more reflective, signaling a shift in understanding that transcended the night's events. Keanu's final words before the segment closed were not just a personal reflection, but a broader message of compassion. Let us all remember to listen, not just to hear, but to understand. The studio audience remained silent, absorbing the power of his message. The cameras pulled back, capturing the gravity of the moment as the lights dimmed slightly. The interview, meant to be light and entertaining, had transformed into a profound exploration of pain, respect, and humanity. For viewers watching at home, this was a rare moment of connection, a reminder that beneath the celebrity lies a person deserving of empathy. Keanu's confrontation was not just with Jimmy, but with a culture that often blurs the line between curiosity and compassion. As the show moved to its next segment, the emotional weight lingered. an indelible imprint of truth shared at great personal cost. Keanu's courage in speaking out would ripple far beyond the studio walls, inspiring conversations about consent, empathy, and the ethics of storytelling. In that moment, Keanu Reeves was not just a guest on a talk show. He was a voice for those whose stories are often overlooked or misunderstood. His words challenged everyone to reconsider how they engage with the pain of others. The segment ended with the studio still holding its breath, the silence a testament to the power of honest dialogue. This was not a performance, but a human connection, forged in the crucible of truth. And as Keanu quietly left the stage, the audience was left with a profound respect for the man who chose to stand, speak, and demand dignity, not just for himself, but for all who carry invisible wounds. Keanu's eyes glistened as the weight of decades bore down on him. Slowly, tears began to fall. Quiet at first, then more freely, streaming down his cheeks like a release long held back. His voice, though trembling, carried a fragile strength as he began to speak the truths he had never voiced publicly. He described the childhood fantasies he had woven in the silence of his mind, stories created to fill the aching void left by his father's absence. "I used to tell myself stories," Keanu said softly, voice barely above a whisper but rich with emotion. "I imagined him as someone who was gone, not because he didn't care, but because he was protecting us." He pictured his father as a spy, someone caught in dangerous circumstances that prevented contact, a man in witness protection, hiding from unseen enemies, a courageous adventurer seeking cures for rare diseases in remote corners of the world. Each fantasy was a shield, a way to soften the harshness of reality for a little boy desperate to believe in love and presence. The studio remained silent, captivated by the raw vulnerability. For so many years, the world had seen Keanu Reeves as an untouchable figure, graceful, enigmatic, almost otherworldly. Tonight, that illusion was cracking. The audience watched a man who was just a son, bearing wounds that no fame or success could heal. "I held onto those stories," Keanu continued, wiping his face with the back of his hand, "because the truth was too painful to face." His words trembled as he spoke, the reality he had avoided for decades. The truth was, my father didn't want to be a father. He wasn't caught in danger. He wasn't hiding. He was simply an inconvenience. The admission fell like a stone into the quiet studio. The room, filled moments ago with the expectation of entertainment, was now heavy with sorrow and understanding. Audience members shifted in their seats, some with tears glistening in their eyes. The vulnerability displayed by a man who had inspired millions broke down the distance between celebrity and human. Keanu's voice grew steadier as he reflected on the impact of that painful truth. It's hard to accept that the person you most wanted to love you didn't want to be there, that you were something to be avoided, not cherished. His tone was gentle but firm, a statement that acknowledged both pain and resilience. He shared the deep loneliness he felt as a child, the confusion that no explanation could fill. "I would watch other kids with their fathers, wondering why I didn't have that, why I wasn't good enough to keep." The honesty in his confession touched a universal chord, a reminder that behind every smile can be hidden a story of loss. The tears continued to flow as Keanu spoke of the emotional scars left by abandonment, wounds that never fully healed, despite years of success and adjuration. Fame and fortune don't erase the pain of being left behind. They can't fill the emptiness that lingers when someone you need just walks away. The audience was silent, moved by the depth of his pain and the courage it took to share it. This was a side of Keanu rarely seen, a man stripped of the protective layers fame often provides, revealing his raw, human heart. Keanu's words broke down the mystique that had surrounded him for decades, revealing not just a star, but a survivor of profound emotional hardship. The studio lights seemed softer now, as if to honor the honesty unfolding before them. He spoke next about the quiet strength it took to carry this pain in silence for so long. For years, I kept these wounds hidden because I thought vulnerability was weakness. His voice faltered briefly, then gained resolve. But I've come to realize that sharing this truth isn't about weakness. It's about healing. As Keanu shared his story, millions watching at home felt a connection that transcended celebrity culture. They saw their own struggles reflected in his pain and his courage. His vulnerability became a beacon, offering hope to those who had suffered in silence. Keanu's tears were not just for himself, but for anyone who had ever felt unworthy or unloved. If my story can help even one person feel less alone, then speaking these words was worth it. His voice was soft, but carried a powerful message of empathy and understanding. The studio remained hushed, the usual buzz of a talk show replaced by a shared moment of compassion. Audience members exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of sorrow and respect. They had witnessed something rare, a celebrity dismantling the walls around his deepest pain. Keanu paused, gathering his strength before continuing. He spoke of his mother, Patricia, the pillar who held their family together through the storm. She was incredible, he said simply, gratitude evident in his tone. She loved us fiercely and did everything she could to protect us. His eyes shimmered with appreciation and lingering sorrow. Yet, even with his mother's love, the absence of his father left a space that could never be filled. No matter how strong the love you receive, the absence of the person who was supposed to be there changes you. Keanu's voice broke slightly as he revealed the lifelong impact of that loss. The audience felt the weight of his words, the invisible scars born from a child's unmet needs. This was no longer just a story of abandonment. It was a lesson in resilience, in finding strength amid pain. Keanu's vulnerability spoke to the humanity behind the fame, reminding everyone that even those who seem untouchable carry their own burdens. We all have stories like this, he said quietly, stories of longing, loss, and learning to live with the pieces left behind. As the tears continued to flow, Keanu expressed hope that by speaking openly, the stigma around abandonment and pain might be lifted. We don't have to hide our scars. They are part of who we are, and they can be a source of strength. The studio lights dimmed slightly, creating an atmosphere of reverence as Keanu's words echoed in the silence. This was a moment of healing, not just for him, but for everyone watching. In that vulnerable space, the boundary between star and spectator vanished. The audience shared in his grief and in his courage to confront it publicly. It was a reminder that beneath the glitz and glamour, true strength lies in embracing our vulnerabilities. Keanu's tearful truths resonated deeply, breaking down the celebrity mystique and forging a genuine connection. This was more than a confession. It was a call for empathy, understanding, and respect for the unseen battles we all face. As the segment drew to a close, Keanu's voice grew softer, but no less powerful. I'm grateful for the love I've received, but I'm also honest about the wounds I carry. His honesty was a gift, a reminder that healing begins with truth. The audience sat in quiet awe, touched by the profound humanity displayed. This was a defining moment, a testament to the power of vulnerability and the courage to speak one's deepest pain. Keanu's tears were a silent testament to the journey from abandonment to acceptance, from silence to voice. And as the cameras captured this raw moment, viewers around the world felt a shared sense of compassion and hope. Keanu took a deep breath, his eyes locking onto Jimmy's with a steadiness that conveyed more than words ever could. You know, he began slowly, there are moments in life that everyone hopes to share with their parents. His voice carried a quiet weight, filled with the gravity of a lifetime of unmet hopes. First steps, first words, the first day of school, achievements, failures, losses, the milestones that shape who we become. He paused, swallowing hard as the memories crowded his mind. When I made my first movie, there was no call, no congratulations, just silence. The studio was silent too, the audience hanging on every word as they sensed the layers beneath. As the years passed, I reached milestones many dream of: fame, success, recognition. But there was never a moment when he reached out. His voice faltered, betraying the pain hidden beneath his composed exterior. The absence was more than physical. It was a persistent echo through every achievement, a hollow space where connection should have been. When you accomplish something, you want to share it with the people who matter, Keanu said, his gaze steady and raw. But when those people aren't there, it's like your victories don't belong to you. They become reminders of what's missing. He spoke of personal losses that cut even deeper, the deaths of loved ones, moments of grief that no amount of fame could soften. I lost my daughter. I lost Jennifer. Times when I needed a father the most, and he never called, never reached out, never said a word. The room felt heavier now, the air thick with unspoken sorrow. Jimmy sat frozen, the weight of Keanu's words settling into the space between them. It was a moment of realization, the lifelong impact of absence on someone who had been viewed only through the lens of success and celebrity. For the first time, he saw not just a star, but a human being marked by profound loneliness. Keanu's voice grew more intense, cutting through the silence like a blade. There's a misconception that success erases childhood wounds. His words were sharp, deliberate. That if you become famous, if you have wealth, those early hurts somehow disappear. They don't. He looked out beyond Jimmy, addressing the millions watching with the urgency of a message long overdue. No amount of applause or accolades can replace the feeling of being unlovable at 3 years old. The crowd was silent, the usual energy of a talk show replaced by something sacred. Keanu's revelation transcended the typical celebrity narrative, exposing a universal truth about human need and pain. That loneliness, he continued, voice thick with emotion, is something I carried quietly for decades. His hands clenched slightly on his knees, a subtle sign of the inner struggle unfolding. He spoke next of the societal pressures that demand silence from those who have suffered. We're taught to hide our pain, to put on a brave face, especially if we're in the public eye, but hiding doesn't heal. His eyes glistened with unshed tears as he made the point clear. It just keeps the wound fresh, locked away where it festers. Keanu's words struck a chord far beyond the studio walls. Millions watching felt the profound loneliness behind the fame, the invisible scars beneath the surface. His courage to speak openly challenged the illusion that success equals happiness. He turned back to Jimmy, his gaze steady, his voice firm. When people see me, they see the roles I play, the movies I star in, the life I lead. But what they don't see is the boy who wondered why he wasn't worth staying for. The admission was raw, cutting through years of silence. The weight of that vulnerability was felt by everyone present. Audience members wiped tears from their eyes, some nodding in silent understanding. Keanu's honesty bridged the gap between celebrity and viewer, reminding all that pain does not discriminate. He spoke candidly about the complexity of love and rejection. You don't become unlovable. You learn that some people are incapable of love. His voice, though quiet, resonated with profound truth. And sometimes those people are the ones who create you. The paradox was heartbreaking. The studio lights softened as Keanu's reflection deepened. He talked about the paradox of building a public life while carrying private wounds. I've been celebrated for decades, but that doesn't mean I've escaped my past. His words carried the bittersweet reality of success, shadowed by unresolved pain. The audience sat in respectful silence, the usual laughter and applause replaced by quiet contemplation. Keanu's story was a mirror, reflecting the hidden struggles of countless viewers. His openness was a gift, a rare moment of genuine human connection in a world often obsessed with image. Keanu's voice took on a hopeful tone as he spoke of healing and acceptance. Acknowledging the pain is the first step toward freedom. His eyes shone with a mix of sorrow and strength. We don't have to let our wounds define us, but we can't ignore them either. He offered a message to anyone carrying similar pain. Your silence is understandable. Your healing doesn't require public performance. The words hung in the air, an invitation to embrace vulnerability on one's own terms. Turning back to Jimmy, Keanu emphasized the importance of empathy. People need to understand the difference between curiosity and compassion, between wanting a story and wanting to help. His gaze was steady, challenging the audience to rethink how they view pain and privacy. Jimmy listened intently, visibly affected by the depth of the conversation. The host's usual humor and ease had given way to solemnity, as he realized the interview had become something far beyond entertainment. Keanu concluded the segment with a call for respect and understanding. We all have stories that shape us, that haunt us, but sharing them should be a choice, not a demand. His words were a quiet plea for kindness in a world too often harsh. The audience responded with heartfelt applause, the energy filled with gratitude and empathy. The moment was more than a celebrity interview. It was a shared human experience, a reminder of our collective need for connection and healing. As the cameras panned out, Keanu's tear-stained face lingered in view, a testament to the power of truth spoken bravely. The studio remained hushed, the impact of his words settling deep. This was a moment that would resonate far beyond the show's broadcast, touching lives and sparking conversations about abandonment, resilience, and the courage to face one's past. Keanu's voice lowered, carrying a quiet power that seemed to fill the entire studio with a profound stillness. I've spent so many years carrying a burden I thought was mine to bear, he began, his eyes steady and thoughtful. I thought I was unlovable because my father left, because he chose not to stay. But the truth I've come to understand is something much deeper. His words hung in the air, inviting the audience and viewers alike into this moment of revelation. He paused, collecting his thoughts with care, as if weighing each word before letting it go. We don't become unlovable, Keanu said softly. Some people are simply incapable of love. The statement, simple yet profound, shifted the entire perspective. It was no longer about the child who was abandoned, but about the one who chose abandonment. The blame that often haunted those left behind was being lifted, replaced by a new understanding that the wound was not the child's fault. The studio remained silent, the weight of that insight settling over everyone like a gentle wave. For many watching, this was a moment of clarity, a reframing of trauma that could transform pain into understanding. The idea that some people, no matter their reasons or circumstances, just can't give love, challenged the cultural narratives that often blamed the victim. Keanu's gaze softened as he spoke of this shift. When you realize that, he said, it changes everything. The loneliness, the questions, the self-doubt, they start to lose their hold. His voice, though gentle, carried an undeniable strength. It was the strength of someone who had wrestled with pain and emerged with a deeper truth, one that brought not just relief but also self-acceptance. He continued, it doesn't erase the hurt, it doesn't make the absence easier to live with, but it helps you stop blaming yourself. It lets you see that the problem was never yours to fix. The audience absorbed this, some nodding in quiet agreement, others wiping away tears. The collective moment of recognition was palpable. Keanu's revelation resonated far beyond the stage. It touched the hearts of anyone who had ever felt unworthy because of someone else's failure to love. The transformation in the room was profound. What began as a tale of abandonment and pain was becoming a story of wisdom and resilience. Keanu's words were a bridge between vulnerability and empowerment, showing that true healing begins with understanding where the fault truly lies. The narrative shifted from shame and self-blame to compassion and clarity. "I've come to accept that love isn't always something given freely," Keanu said, his tone reflective. "Sometimes it's a choice that some people never make, and that's their failing, not ours." The clarity in his voice was like a beacon, lighting a path out of darkness for anyone struggling with similar wounds. His message was clear. Self-worth does not depend on others' capacity to love. Keanu's calm presence filled the space as he spoke about moving beyond pain. Acceptance doesn't mean forgetting or pretending it didn't hurt. It means acknowledging the truth and choosing to live anyway. The room seemed to breathe with him. The weight of years of silence lifted in this moment of shared understanding. He looked toward Jimmy, his expression one of quiet resolve. "This realization gave me permission to stop searching for something that was never there." His words were both a personal confession and a universal truth. The struggle to find love where it was absent is a common human experience. But recognizing the limits of others' ability to give love is a powerful step toward healing. The audience was deeply moved, many visibly touched by the honesty and insight pouring from Keanu's voice. The distinction between pain and wisdom was clear now. What could have been just another celebrity story was instead a lesson in compassion and self-acceptance. Keanu had transformed his trauma into a message of hope and strength. In this turning point, the pain that once defined Keanu's silence found its voice. It spoke not of despair, but of resilience. A testimony to the human spirit's capacity to find peace amidst brokenness. The studio lights seemed to dim slightly, focusing attention solely on him, as if honoring the significance of this moment. Keanu's final words in this section carried a gentle but unyielding power. "We don't have to carry the weight of others' failures. We can learn to love ourselves even when others don't." The sentiment was a balm to the soul, offering healing to anyone who had been left behind. His insight was a reminder that love's absence does not define worth. The studio remained quiet, the audience fully present in the shared experience. Keanu's vulnerability had created a sacred space, one where pain was met with understanding and where isolation gave way to connection. For many watching, it was a moment that transcended entertainment, becoming a lesson in human dignity. As the cameras captured every subtle expression, Keanu's words continued to echo. The idea that some people simply cannot love was difficult, but liberating. It meant that the scars of abandonment were not stains on the soul, but invitations to compassion for oneself and others. This moment marked a profound turning point, from pain to wisdom, from silence to self-acceptance. Keanu's courage to share this truth allowed him to reclaim his story and offer a gift to those who had walked similar paths. The collective understanding in the studio was palpable, a shared acknowledgement of the power in embracing truth. With that, the atmosphere shifted. The heaviness of sorrow gave way to a quiet strength. Keanu's presence was no longer just that of a beloved actor, but of a human being who had faced his deepest wounds and emerged with clarity. The studio and viewers alike were forever changed by his philosophical revelation. Keanu sat in the guest chair, the weight of his own words settling around him like a heavy blanket. His tears no longer fought back. They streamed freely down his face, each one a testament to the years of silence, pain, and unresolved sorrow. The measured, controlled breathing techniques he had relied on moments before were no longer necessary. Now his breath came naturally, rising and falling with the rhythm of a man finally allowing himself to feel without restraint. The atmosphere in the studio shifted profoundly. The usual buzz of talk show banter was replaced by a thick, almost tangible stillness. Jimmy Kimmel sat opposite Keanu, utterly speechless. His usual quick wit, practiced ease, and smooth delivery were nowhere to be found. In their place was a genuine human compassion, a recognition of the depth of suffering that had just been shared so openly, so vulnerably. The audience remained frozen in their seats, captivated not by spectacle or entertainment, but by the rawness of the moment. Their eyes were wide with empathy. Some had tears glistening, others simply stared in quiet reverence. The energy in the room was no longer about applause or laughter, it was about connection. For a brief, sacred time, the studio transformed from a stage for celebrity to a shared space for human vulnerability. Keanu, still absorbing the enormity of what he had just said aloud for the first time, gathered himself. Slowly, with careful intention, he prepared to close this deeply emotional revelation. There was strength in his movement now, not the brittle strength of someone masking pain, but the resilient strength of someone who had faced his darkest wounds and chosen to share them anyway. The silence stretched, heavy but not oppressive. It was filled with unspoken understanding, the collective breath of the studio, the viewers watching at home, the millions connected by the broadcast, all held in that moment of stillness. Keanu's presence anchored it, a quiet beacon of courage and truth amidst the fragile quiet. Jimmy finally shifted, his eyes meeting Keanu's with a softness that spoke volumes. No words were spoken yet, but the connection was unmistakable. It was a moment when the boundaries between host and guest, celebrity and audience, dissolved in the face of genuine human experience. Keanu's tears continued to fall as he steadied his voice to speak again, this time with a gentler resolve. He looked out toward the cameras, aware that millions were witnessing not just his story, but the pain and resilience behind it. His words were carefully chosen, a bridge from his personal grief to a universal message. "This isn't easy," Keanu admitted quietly, his voice barely above a whisper, but carrying across the studio with remarkable clarity. Sharing something so deeply personal takes more than courage, it takes trust. His eyes glistened, and his face showed the toll of decades spent guarding this secret. "But," he continued, drawing strength from the collective stillness, "I believe that in our shared vulnerability, we find healing. Not just for me, but for anyone who has ever felt alone in their pain." The room responded, the audience shifting, some nodding, others wiping tears from their cheeks. The moment was not just about Keanu's story. It was about every person who had carried invisible wounds, who had suffered in silence. The studio, once a place of scripted entertainment, had become a sanctuary for truth. The profound stillness was a shared acknowledgement that pain and healing often come wrapped together. Jimmy finally found his voice, his tone respectful and sincere. "Keanu, thank you for trusting us with this," he said softly. "You've reminded all of us that beneath the fame and success, there's a real person, with real struggles and real strength." His words were met with warm applause, gentle but heartfelt. Keanu's response was humble. "Thank you, Jimmy. This means more than you know." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I hope that by sharing this, others feel less alone, that it helps someone else find the courage to face their own truth." His voice carried the weight of someone who had found a new purpose in vulnerability. The cameras lingered on Keanu's tear-streaked face, capturing the depth of the moment without interruption. It was a stillness filled with meaning, a rare glimpse into the humanity behind the public figure. The studio lights softened, as if honoring the sincerity that had filled the space. As the minutes passed, the quiet held, allowing everyone present and watching to reflect. Keanu's bravery had turned what began as an interview into a shared experience of healing. It was a reminder that even those who seem larger than life carry wounds that require compassion and understanding. The audience remained silent, many moved to tears, their hearts opened by Keanu's honesty. The studio crew, usually bustling and busy, respected the gravity of the moment, working with care to preserve its integrity. No forced smiles, no scripted closings, just real, human connection. Keanu took a deep breath, the first truly free one in a long time, and prepared to stand. His movements were deliberate but calm, signaling a readiness to step away from the spotlight, at least for now. He turned to Jimmy, offering a small but genuine smile, one that conveyed both gratitude and quiet resolve. Jimmy rose as well, his expression mixed with admiration and a touch of regret. Regret for having pushed too hard, but admiration for Keanu's strength in sharing so openly. The audience stood in solidarity, their applause gentle but filled with respect. Keanu's final words before leaving the stage carried a message of hope and resilience. "Healing is not a destination, but a journey," he said softly, "and sometimes the first step is simply being seen and heard." His voice, though quiet, resonated deeply with everyone present. As Keanu walked off the set, the studio remained enveloped in stillness, the echoes of his vulnerability lingering in the air. This was more than a talk show moment. It was a profound testament to the power of truth and the courage it takes to share it. The cameras slowly faded to black, leaving behind a silence that spoke louder than words. The shared experience of pain and healing had transformed a routine interview into an unforgettable act of human connection. Keanu's eyes locked with Jimmy's, steady and unwavering, filling the room with a silence heavier than any spoken word. The moment stretched, charged with the gravity of everything that had just unfolded. "Jimmy," Keanu began, his voice low but clear, "there is a cost to exposing trauma for entertainment." His words carried the weight of decades of guarded pain, a quiet but powerful reminder to the host and to all who listen that some wounds are not for public display. He continued, voice steady but layered with deep emotion. "Respecting boundaries isn't just about politeness, it's a necessity. Some stories carry pain so profound they belong only to the person who lived them. They are not content for cameras or curiosities for an audience hungry for spectacle." Each syllable seemed to echo across the studio, touching every corner with the weight of experience. Keanu's statement was not only a boundary, but a lesson he had learned the hard way. Then, turning slowly to face the camera, his eyes softened, revealing a tenderness beneath the strength. "To everyone watching who carries wounds like mine," he said gently, "your pain is valid, your silence is understandable, and your healing doesn't require public performance." The words were an embrace to all the hidden hearts tuning in, an acknowledgement that healing is deeply personal, something sacred that need not be broadcast or judged. The studio fell into a hushed reverence. Millions of viewers felt the sincerity in Keanu's voice, a balm to those who have carried their burdens in silence. His words broke through the polished veneer of celebrity culture, revealing a raw human truth that resonated far beyond the television screen. After a quiet pause, Keanu's voice took on a firmer edge, a warning sharpened by years of pain. "And to those who chose comfort over responsibility, those who abandoned children like me, remember this. Your comfort was purchased with someone else's lifelong pain." The studio was gripped by an intense stillness, the severity of his message settling like a solemn verdict on absent parents everywhere. Keanu's breathing was calm, measured, yet his posture radiated the quiet dignity of a man reclaiming his narrative. Slowly, he rose from the guest chair with deliberate grace, every movement conveying strength forged through adversity. The cameras caught every moment, capturing the transformation of pain into power, vulnerability into command. His tear-streaked face reflected softly under the studio lights, a portrait of courage and resilience. Without looking back or uttering another word, Keanu turned toward the backstage exit. Each step echoed a declaration: dignity over spectacle, healing over exploitation. The studio remained motionless, held captive by the intensity of the moment. Jimmy sat frozen behind his desk, staring at the now empty chair, his usual confidence replaced by stunned silence. Around him, the audience sat in quiet reflection, many wiping away tears, all absorbing the profound humanity laid bare before them. Keanu disappeared from view, leaving behind an atmosphere thick with emotion and a silence pregnant with meaning. The cameras kept rolling, not for scripted farewells or rehearsed conclusions, but to capture the unfiltered reality of a moment that defied television conventions. This was a shared experience, a collective witnessing of vulnerability and strength converging in real time. As the studio lights dimmed, signaling the end of the broadcast, the conversation sparked by Keanu's courage began to spread like wildfire. Across social media, clips of the interview circulated, not as fodder for gossip or ridicule, but as catalysts for honest discussion about trauma, abandonment, and the importance of consent. Mental health advocates praised Keanu's bravery, acknowledging the impact of his words on millions who silently endure similar pain. The interview ignited a broader reflection within the entertainment industry about the ethics of extracting personal stories from celebrities, many of whom carry deep wounds hidden beneath public facades. In the days following, Jimmy Kimmel publicly acknowledged his missteps, his reputation bearing the strain of criticism, but also showing a rare moment of humility. The incident prompted talk shows and interviewers worldwide to reconsider how they approach sensitive topics, balancing curiosity with compassion. Meanwhile, Keanu retreated from the spotlight to process the experience and its aftermath. When he returned, it was with a renewed sense of purpose and clear boundaries. He became an outspoken advocate for consent in media, using his influence to protect others from the exploitation he had endured. The empty guest chair from that night took on a new symbolism, a monument to strength and self-respect. It stood as a testament to the power of walking away, of refusing to participate in one's own emotional exploitation, and of reclaiming the right to privacy. In that silence, Keanu's departure became a triumph, a profound statement that dignity and healing are worth more than any moment of televised vulnerability. Those present and those watching understood they had witnessed someone choosing truth over comfort, humanity over performance. Beyond the studio, the dialogue about trauma and healing continued. No longer hidden or hushed, these conversations illuminated by the bravery of one man willing to speak his truth. Keanu's story became an invitation to others to find their voices, to embrace their stories, and to know their pain is seen and valued. This was more than a celebrity interview. It was a testament to human resilience, a call for empathy, and a challenge to society to honor the private struggles behind public personas. For anyone who has ever felt abandoned, unseen, or unloved, Keanu's final words offered solace and strength. You are not alone, and your healing matters. The cameras continued to roll, capturing the stunned expressions on Jimmy Kimmel's face and the heavy silence that enveloped the studio audience. What had begun as a typical late-night talk show interview had transformed into a raw and intimate moment of truth that no one present could have anticipated. Jimmy's usual quick wit and ease were replaced by a quiet shock, his eyes reflecting a mixture of regret and disbelief. Around him, the audience sat motionless, many visibly moved, some wiping away tears, all absorbing the depth of what they had just witnessed. As the broadcast ended, the silence in the studio lingered, thick with the weight of Keanu's words and the power of his vulnerability. Viewers at home were equally captivated, their screens showing a scene far removed from scripted entertainment. This was real. This was human. The conversation had pierced through celebrity glamour, revealing the profound loneliness and pain that can lie beneath even the most beloved public figures. Within minutes of the show's airing, social media erupted. Clips of the interview spread rapidly, but unlike the typical sensational or mocking reactions often directed at celebrity moments, the response was overwhelmingly one of respect, empathy, and solidarity. Thousands shared their own stories of abandonment, loss, and the long, difficult path toward healing. Comments poured in from people who saw themselves reflected in Keanu's pain, grateful that he had spoken out loud what so many endure in silence. Mental health advocates and professionals seized the moment, praising Keanu's bravery and the courage it took to confront such deeply personal wounds in a public forum. They highlighted how his openness sparked crucial conversations about childhood trauma, the complexities of family dynamics, and the urgent need for ethical considerations in media interviews. The dialogue expanded beyond entertainment, moving into important societal discussions about consent, privacy, and the long-term impact of emotional abandonment. Amid the wave of public support for Keanu, Jimmy Kimmel faced intense scrutiny. Critics pointed out the ethical shortcomings of pressing a guest into such vulnerable territory without full consent. The conversation shifted toward examining the responsibilities of talk show hosts and producers, especially when dealing with sensitive subjects that can cause real harm. In response, Jimmy issued a public apology, expressing remorse for underestimating the emotional impact of his questions and promising to reevaluate his interviewing approach. The incident became a wake-up call within the industry, encouraging many to rethink how they balance journalistic curiosity with compassion. Meanwhile, Keanu retreated from the public eye for several weeks. This time away was essential, allowing him space to process the flood of emotions and the overwhelming attention following the interview. But when he returned, it was with renewed strength and clarity. He set firm boundaries around what aspects of his life he was willing to discuss publicly, communicating a powerful message that vulnerability does not require availability. Keanu became an advocate for respectful media conduct, using his experience to support others who might face similar pressures or exploitation. The empty guest chair from that night's show evolved into a potent symbol. It represented not weakness or absence, but dignity and strength, a refusal to participate in the commodification of personal pain. It stood as a quiet monument to the power of saying no, to protecting one's own story from being reduced to mere content. Beyond the studio, the story of that night continued to inspire. Conversations about trauma, healing, and the need for empathy grew louder and more widespread. Survivors of abandonment found hope in Keanu's honesty, recognizing that their own pain was valid and that healing could be sought on their own terms. The dialogue extended into communities, mental health organizations, and media circles, fostering a deeper understanding of the scars left by early loss and the importance of honoring personal boundaries. As the narrative closed, there was a hopeful note, an acknowledgement that while the wounds of abandonment and trauma run deep, the power of truth and the courage to speak can ignite healing not just for one person but for many. Keanu Reeves' emotional revelation had transcended the confines of a television interview, becoming a beacon for compassion, respect, and the ongoing journey toward understanding ourselves and each other. This was more than a story about a celebrity's pain. It was a universal tale of resilience, the complexity of human relationships, and the profound impact of kindness and respect in a world often eager to pry and expose. In the stillness left behind, the conversation about trauma and healing continues, no longer whispered in shadows but spoken openly, with the hope that through truth and empathy, wounds can begin to mend.